Hi guys, welcome back to Mysteries with Pippa. I am so glad you're all back and that you're having a lovely weekend. But here, as usual, we're here to do a very tragic case. And today's case is the missing disappearance of Maura Murray. So take a seat back, relax, maybe get a hot drink. I know I always have a hot drink, and let's go on with the case. Before I do get on with the case, I just want to say that if you guys don't know me, my name's Pippa and I do all things mysterious. So whether it be missing persons case or killer kids, this is the channel to follow if you like that stuff. I'm also available on Facebook and on Instagram just by typing in Mysteries with Pippa. So without further ado, let's get on with the case. Maura Murray was born on the 4th of May 1982 in Hanson, Massachusetts. She had 4 siblings and she predominantly lived with her mother, as her mother and father broke up when she was 6. So her and her siblings were quite a bunch. So some of them were very successful and graduated from amazing universities, and one of her sisters had a drink problem and was in rehab. And so Maura kind of took the middle bit. So she was both a really good student, but she also had a bit of criminal activity upon her, which I will go into. Maura graduated from Whitman-Hanson Regional High School. She was an amazing athlete while there, and she began to study nursing at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. So like I said, she did have kind of a small criminal past, and it's some things that I just want to highlight before her disappearance. She had been convicted of stealing, I think, makeup. She had to leave a really prestigious university because they were going to expel her because she had stolen makeup. She also was done for using kind of credit card fraud. She said she found a receipt that had kind of credit card numbers on it in a bin, and that's how she was doing it. And she was buying kind of a lot of food on this credit card. The charges were dropped after 3 months because of good behaviour, and she never went on to commit another crime, so to speak. And so they kind of dismissed all the charges, but it's worth mentioning that she did buy a lot of food on there and she was bulimic, so she did make herself sick, and part of the involvement of that is kind of gorging on food and then throwing up, and they reckon this is what she was using the stolen credit card for. While growing up, I don't think her family properly understood her mental illness of being bulimic, and so they would often make little snide remarks and say things like, oh, like, what's the point in eating if you're just going to be sick anyway? And that is quite heartbreaking, I think, to hear. So Saturday the 7th of February 2004, 2 days before her disappearance, Maura and her father met up for kind of a dad and daughter date. So they went out for some lunch, they looked at some used cars because Maura's car was acting up, it was kind of stalling and it was splashing out oil, it just wasn't good. And then after the meal, Fred lent his daughter his Toyota Corolla. I can't say the word. Toyota Corolla. Oh my god. Corolla. I don't know why I can't say it. Toyota Corolla. He had lent his daughter his Toyota I'm just gonna say car. He lent his daughter his car so she could go to a dorm party, and this was being held at her university. She left the university party at 2:30 a.m. and at about approximately 3:30 a.m. en route 9 on the way back to her dad's motel where he was staying, she crashed the car. She caused about £10,000 worth of damage. And there was a report written by a police officer, but there was no kind of reference to how sober or not sober she was. It was just to state that there had been a crash. Her father did say that she wasn't in trouble because he knew the insurance would cover it, although I think if I crashed one of my parents' car, I would be in a lot of trouble. But I don't know, he says that she wasn't in trouble, that he was okay with this, that he was just more worried about how he was going to find transportation to go home because he'd only popped down for the weekend to see her. Then on February the 9th, 2004, her lessons at university were cancelled due to a snowstorm. Also on that day, she had emailed her professors and tutors and said that she was having a week off work due to a family emergency, that someone had died in her family. This is later found out to be false. No one had died in her family. There was no family emergency. She had made it up. After she had emailed her tutors, she had then drove to a local ATM and withdrew all the money out of her account. She withdrew $280. She then went to a local store and she purchased around about $40 worth of alcohol. And then she began to drive. And no one knew about this, none of her family, not her boyfriend, not her friends, knew that she was kind of taking a week off uni and was going somewhere. At 7:20 that evening, Maura crashed her car along Route 112, just a day after crashing her father's car. At 7:27 p.m, a local resident had heard the crash and kind of found and looked out and saw that there was a car that had crashed, and she had called the police. A couple of minutes later, a man was driving by. He was a bus driver just coming home from work, and he lived in the neighbourhood, and he saw that there had been a crashed car with Maura in it. The neighbour reported to have asked her if she was okay and if she needed some assistance, and she said no, she was fine, that she had called the AAA. And she also pleaded with him not to ring the police. He was on his way home and realised that there was no reception on his phone, and then realised as well that she must have been lying about ringing the AAA. So as soon as he got home, he rang the police, and the police showed up 10 minutes later to the kind of scene and the incident where Maura was, but she wasn't there. When he inspected the car, he saw kind of red stains in the car on the driver's seat, and also outside the car on the floor and on the roof of the car, and these appeared to be red in colour, and they smell and look like red wine stains. So all her belongings were found. There was her makeup, her jewellery, there was a map to Vermont and how to climb mountains, and that's exactly where she was heading. It looked like to Vermont, but her credit cards, debit cards and her cell phone were missing, but everything else was in there. There was even clothes in there, her favourite stuffed toy, she had birth control pills that she'd left, that would have been left in there, and she hasn't been seen since then. And her credit cards and debit cards, her phone, nothing as well has been used as well since that day. A journalist kind of summarised the whole of the story in just a couple of sentences, which I really want to read out because it is so true. So the journalist summarised it as: she went off the road, her car hit a tree, a neighbour came along and asked her if she needed help. She refused. 10 minutes later, the police turned to the scene and Maura Murray was gone. What also is strange is that when they searched her dorm rooms, everything had been packed away as if she was moving. So there were posters off her wall, everything was neat in boxes, and she had hand typed an email to her boyfriend and printed it out and kind of left it on top of the boxes, and it was just kind of stating all the issues that they were having in the relationship, which was a bit weird. People are not sure whether she was packing and was kind of planning for something else, or if she just hadn't unpacked yet because it'd just been past the winter break. The next day they had reported her as a missing person. Maura's boyfriend was travelling on a plane, and so at that time he had turned his phone off, but when he had turned his phone back on, he had had a voicemail, and when he listened to the voicemail, it sounded like Maura kind of crying and sobbing into the phone but not saying anything. They had traced the call back, and it had, as far as I'm aware, it had been traced back to an American Red Cross kind of service, which is very odd. So here are the theories behind Maura's disappearance. So, like police always do with investigations, they initially just assumed two things. One, that she had run away, or two, that she was suicidal and had committed suicide. On February the 11th, the police brought sniffer dogs to the scene where the car had crashed, and the dogs picked up her scent about 100 yards from where she had crashed. And then straight after that, they had lost the scent. This hinted to police that she had been picked up or had gotten into another vehicle willingly or unwillingly. So there is another theory that someone had passed along the road, took an opportunity and had kidnapped her and killed her, which is surprisingly what her father, Fred, does think. He is pretty convinced that she was kidnapped and that she is dead. I don't know, I'd always wonder if you'd always have hope or if you'd be logical about the situation, but that is what her father thinks. Then, in November 2004, a man had come forward and reported his brother as the one who killed Maura. He reported this to Fred Murray, her father, and also handed him a rusty knife and said that this was used for the killing. It's also interesting to note the man did state his brother was acting weird, and so was his brother's girlfriend on the day that Maura disappeared and also the days afterwards. And the brother of the man who had been reported to Fred also scrapped his Volvo car just days after the man had reported him. Then in 2006, they did another search with cadaver dogs as well. They also expanded their search by kilometres, and the police dogs had picked up a smell of death and kind of alerted the authorities to this at a particular house. Can you guess whose house this is? It was the house of the man's brother who had been reported. Then, in 2012, a YouTuber by the name of Mr. 112 Dirtbag had posted a series of videos kind of hinting at where Maura was buried, and this turned out to be a hoax. And these are all the theories so far, so no one has been convicted for her murder. There is not enough evidence to convict anyone at this stage. There is also another theory that people believe her father has something to do with it for two reasons. The first reason is when apparently they had this father-daughter date, they went used car shopping. She never actually mentioned it to anyone, so when she met her friend later on for lunch, she never once said like, oh, I met my dad, we went used car shopping. And so some people believe that she'd actually just called her father or got in touch with her father after the car crash, and he'd picked her up and something had happened. And also for 2 years after the investigation, he refused to police to give an interview, and when he eventually did, after 2 years, when he was forced to, he had brought 2 lawyers in with him. Like, why wouldn't you want to help find your daughter? But some people also believe that, you know, he saw it as a threat and so he was just protecting himself. But it's still kind of weird. But yeah, there's not enough evidence to prosecute anyone. I have been following the case closely, and it is heartbreaking in a space of 10 minutes that someone can just disappear and go missing. If you do have any other theories, if you've heard any, or you'd just like to comment below just generally about the story, how you're feeling, please do. And if you like this story or like the way that I tell it, you might give me a thumbs up. And if you love my stories and the way I tell them, you might follow me. So again, thank you so much for listening in. This is Mysteries with Pippa.